What's going on, gamers? So we got Indiana Jones and the Great Circle actually being reviewed by Digital Foundry, and it says PS5 and PS5 Pro tech review. Excellent game, decent point. The thing is, though, is that the Xbox version is included in this, so this is going to get interesting. And in here, we see some parts where Series X, because it's fully optimized correctly, um, it outperforms the PlayStation 5 base, which as it should, because when I see that, this doesn't surprise me. Whereas when the beginning of the generation was happening, that wasn't going on, and I've explained to people why that happened. Because math says that shouldn't be happening. PS5 should not be running better. And you got people saying it's because of Mark Sony. I'm like, no, it's because of market share. Because they realized they're going to sell more on there, so they would get more profit. And because that automatically happens, they were just optimizing it, and it was an easy optimization coming from PS4 Pro to PS5 because the architecture difference is it's not really that much different. So the transition over was smooth, and Sony made a shortcut to have it like RDNA 1.8 or something, so that could happen. Whereas the Series X was RDNA 2 from the ground up. So they never got that advantage because they didn't have the market share, and if they weren't paying the devs to do that, they were just bulldozing those other settings, or just not fully doing it, and then that's why we would see those differences. So I had to explain that to people, and some people that it just didn't want to hear it, but that's the way that it works. Ponies, sit down. So, and here we'll find out this again, because once again, who's developing this? Well, they're with Microsoft now, so right, nothing crazy going on. Although Digital Foundry does say decent port, so we're gonna see what happens. All right, I got it to the parts to where we could see the PS5 versus Xbox. Then it'll probably appear again somewhere close to 10, so we'll get to that. All right, let's get into this. All right, y'all, let's go.
In terms of image quality, as raw metrics, they only point to the extreme best and worst cases, but the average practical resolution tends to rest in between those values. For example, focusing on PS5 and Series X, which share the same 1200 to 1800p range, it's clear that Series X often runs at a higher resolution on average.
So you saw what he says on average. Going over here, it's quite clear right here which version looks better. This is the Series X version. It clearly looks better. Not way better, but enough to say that, yeah, this is the version. And they're using a DRS method, which means dynamic resolution scaling. And Microsoft's dynamic resolution scaling system is better than Sony's. They have a better GPU, so not that it's like that much better or anything, but more like you see what system is better because the DRS on the Xbox is giving you better image quality because it has a better GPU. Also has a better CPU as well and RAM. So with all those things going in, this should have always been a result for every game. Otherwise, something's going on in the development department.
Focusing on PS5 and Series X, which share the same 1200 to 1800p range, it's clear that Series X often runs at a higher resolution on average. In almost every scenario, Series X renders more pixels per frame, resulting in a sharper resolve, especially visible while zooming into the dense jungle detail of the first level.
So you see, it's hard to tell, like if you just stare, but if you stare close enough, you'll be able to tell how the resolution is a little bit better.
This Series X image quality advantage is curious, but consistent with another id Tech 7 game, Doom Eternal. In both cases, we have a use of hardware-based variable rate shading, VRS, which was engineered by Microsoft,
Which is what I started last night, so I'll be playing some more Doom Eternal later on, so y'all look out for that. Definitely having a blast doing that.
Advanced Technology Group. Also, much like Doom Eternal, the Great Circle shares the same 1800p target resolution, where VRS reduces the bandwidth taken up by pixel shading threads. It's a huge benefit for taxing ray-traced games in this mold, and ultimately frees up Series X's GPU to push to higher resolutions along its DRS scale.
Okay, that makes sense. So they're using VRS. Series X is using dynamic resolution scaling, and that's working out better.
This would go a long way to explain the sharper image next to PS5, where hardware VRS is not supported, and
So we see that.
despite their matching DRS ranges. Just as with Doom Eternal though, compared to PS5, there are subtle downsides to using this feature, notably a more obvious form of block noise. Neither console is totally free of visual noise, even with film grain and chromatic aberration disabled, but these block noise artifacts are more apparent on Series X. One example of this in action that I've found is this zoom in on Indiana's suit. At a regular viewing distance, it's not a massive distraction, and these issues are ultimately outweighed by the way VRS affords Series X a boost in overall clarity.
Okay, so you're saying they're both using that, and it benefits.
The PS5 Pro enhancement is worth touching on too. While hardware-based VRS is in theory a feature on PS5 Pro, it appears the rendering setup in the Great Circle is no different to the base console. Even so, PS5 Pro excels for its ability to generate higher resolution frames, afforded by a beefier 16.7 teraflop GPU. Going up to a native 4K at best means the fine threadwork of clothing appears pin sharp, especially compared to base PS5, as does the presentation of grass in the opening jungle. PS5 Pro pushes the cleanest image of the trio here, even if benefits in settings outside of this are rather.
That's what I would expect, and that's good to know how they're showing that, and that's what I mean by happening to zoom in to see that clear difference. Though you see it, but it's another example of showing diminishing returns more than ever. But at the end of the day, the Series X version holds up very well. That's good to see. It's good to see that they didn't cheap out on any ports, which they wouldn't do that. And they're both using VRS and DRS. And we see that the Series X version is outperforming the PlayStation while doing that.
Limited. Jumping to performance testing next, the Great Circle benefits from strong optimization on PS5 and PS5 Pro alike for any regular gameplay. Each one is tightly optimized around a 60 FPS target, where areas flooded with NPCs or the dense jungles simply fly by at 60. For any variances in on-screen load, their dynamic resolution setups are able to compensate, though it's not always a perfectly smooth ride. Much like Series X, there are two minor nuisances that carry over to PS5 systems. Firstly, there is an auto-saving feature which will trigger a small hitch, a frame time spike that kicks in at invisible thresholds around the world. It's especially obvious while navigating the Vatican City, with each mini-stutter being followed by a small autosave symbol, and all round, it's a shame that it's not more discreet. The second point relates to the in-engine cutscenes. As authentic as each cinematic is, every camera cut is coupled with a string of dropped frames. Most likely, this is a buffer of sorts used by the renderer to allow the physics-based elements on screen, like clothing, to.
It makes a lot of sense. This is a great game, by the way, y'all. I recommend playing this. I beat it on PC, played it on max settings. Looks absolutely amazing. Not max, but pretty good.
To settle for a few frames first, and therefore avoid a distracting position refresh with every cut. Likewise, it might be there to help disguise the game's DRS switches. Still, the end result is PS5, PS5 Pro, and Series X all drop frames at these exact same moments, and as you can see, there's nothing to split them. With all that being said, there is one repeatable drop during an in-engine scene later in the crypts of the Vatican. This is a rare outlier case really, given that everything else runs so well, but it does underline a Series X advantage. As Indiana studies this parchment, a vehicle comes crashing through the ceiling, causing a burst of alpha and particle effects to fill the frame. In this moment, Series X has the GPU headroom to get closest to 60 frames per second, with the expected hitches.
Oh, damn, that's a huge advantage. This is what I mean.
On every camera cut. PS5, by comparison, takes a more drastic hit, down to the 40s. Again, this is a rare moment.
CPU differences. But yeah, I mean, it's stuff like that where it's like, you see it holding there, and look at that unsteadiness on the blue lines right there. You could see that, where there's nothing happening on these two. Some interesting stuff, huh? Um, and like I said, VRS and DRS, as he was saying, dynamic resolution scaling, by the way, is working more in favor on the Series X because the technology is better. And there's no argument against that. Ponies, sit down. It's literally just seeing. Y'all know that I be doing my comparison videos. You know, I love doing these because there's really no argument here. It's more like a realization. People that want to argue are people that can't accept reality. I don't mind debating because you can get somewhere, but sometimes arguments are just a waste of time for certain people. Because it's like you're just being a fanboy. Let's just look at the reality and let's accept the honest results, and then let's talk about it. No, 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 no. But what about no, bro? These are the results. You know what I mean? Unless somebody's lying, but we'd be able to tell that. But yeah, once again,
Moment. But I figured it worth highlighting to show another potential advantage of Series X's hardware VRS.
yeah,
Indiana Jones and The Great Circle makes a successful leap onto PS5 platforms, and despite its delayed release, everything we loved about the Xbox experience is intact. In comparison, the Series X is a preference over the base PS5, given the often higher average resolution on Xbox, but the margin
but you hear what they just said, right? So it's not an argument. It's obvious that it's more optimized than the average Series X third-party port, and when we see that, it's obvious that it's going to be favorable over the PS5 version because you'll be getting it on Game Pass and you're getting it on a system where it performs better. So it would be preferable to play that on Series X.
isn't wide enough to be a deal breaker. PS5 owners still get a superb take on Machine Games' latest work here. In every other respect, the two are matched, right down to the consistency of their 60 FPS readings in gameplay, and of course the use of RTGI. PS5 Pro, meanwhile, enjoys an extra benefit in image clarity over the other consoles, with a higher 4K maximum target, while still hitting 60 FPS.
Yeah.
The only criticism here is one I'd level at all three consoles, that the shadow filtering remains a rough spot that only the PC version is currently able to fix. Beyond that, it's a well-recommended release on PS5 if you're sticking with console. But that's all from me today. If you did find this video useful or insightful in any way, feel free to like or subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell.
For sure. Good video, brother. There we have it. Let me know what y'all think about this. So we got our analysis now on how things actually work, how the DRS is working, the VRS is working, what's the differences between the systems, them both being optimized as much as they can optimize now, and we're seeing the differences. So it's not an argument here, it's a realization. There we have it. Series X takes the win against base PlayStation 5. PS5 Pro version is obviously the best version, as it should be, with better technology, because math easily says so. So there we have it. All right, y'all. Peace out.